Hello and welcome to the Spotlight, a series of talks with CXOs, infrastructure executives, where we discuss everything cloud, infrastructure, and enterprise. Today, it's my pleasure to speak with Shruthi Rao, co-founder and chief business officer at Vendia. Hello, Shruthi, and thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you, Rajan. Nice to be here.
Wonderful. I wanted to at least start off a bit differently. I would like to talk to you a little bit about your journey, your experiences, and an interesting painting that you have in your background. What shaped your career and what are your other interests?
Yeah, definitely. And then we'll talk a little bit about the painting. I made the painting, so I'm yours truly is the artist here. So happy to talk about that. But I started my career right after undergrad in computer science and engineering at McKinsey and Company. That was my first role. I loved the consultant's life, the dropping into a company and adding immediate value. That was great. Then went to business school and law school and did a rotational program at AT&T where I focused on M&A and corp dev. Did the AT&T, DirecTV, and Singular merger. Went to Bank of America. Did the Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and a countrywide merger there. That was some roller coaster ride in the last financial crisis. And then went to a startup for a little bit as a partnership and strategic alliances. And then went to AWS. That was the beginning of my infrastructure journey. Met Tim Wagner, who's now my co-founder, who founded the thesis for serverless, the father of modern day serverless, scaled the business with them, and then started the blockchain category, launched a couple of services, grew that business, and met 1,092 unique customers when I ran that business for AWS. And those customers actually informed me about what is this pain point that they all had that traditional blockchains or traditional cloud providers could not solve. And that's what led me to create Vendia. So Vendia is short for Venn diagram, two circles coming together to share something that they have without turning into squares or triangles. How does this add to the painting? That question that you asked is really one thing that has been very common in my life, not just professionally, also personally, is being very open and comfortable with failing. And I think art, any kind of art, painting, woodworking, there's some vulnerability associated with art. When you make art and put it out there for the world to see, in my case, on a Zoom background, that's the most vulnerable thing you can do. People will judge you. People will look at you and think of you as right or wrong or brilliant or completely insane and all at the same time. And you should be comfortable with people judging you. And I think art has helped me lean into that vulnerability, lean into that being judged and being okay with it. So yes, this is oil on canvas. I did this a few years ago. I've had it in roles for many, many years, and I recently stretched it out after the pandemic happened. Thank you for noticing.
Absolutely. It's such a beautiful piece of work. You can ascribe all the adjectives that you mentioned, brilliant. I won't call you insane, but hey, if that's what you like to be described, that's fine. But it is certainly, it explains to some degree the great level of successes you've had. I mean, anybody who can create such a beautiful piece of art. You have had a strong track record of success. You have been executive at large companies, as you mentioned, like Amazon, and startup like Feedzai, is that correct?
Feedzai, yeah. Feedzai. Yeah.
And Vendia, it's quite you start off in a consulting assignment, you move to corporate, and then from corporate now you have been an entrepreneur. What do you think are the attributes that have contributed to your success and also shaped your journey?
Let me take you back to when I was growing up in India as a little girl. And my parents, I would call my parents are typical Indian parents. They wanted me to be top in my class, but also wanted me to do all of these other activities, whether it was a dance class or a singing class, which I was terrible at, or some kind of a painting or doll making, or I went to karate, swimming. I did a lot of different things. And I was pretty bad at a lot of different things. I was good at a few things, but I was pretty bad at a lot of things. But we had a rule that I had to try it for at least 3 months. And I had to try in earnest for at least 3 months before I said, yep, this is not working. It's not working because I don't like it, or it's not working because I'm really bad at it, like singing. What that taught me was that there are things that I will like, the things I won't like. There are things I'll be good at, and it won't be good. I will not be good at, and it's okay. Going into things, being okay with failing was a very important learning that I got from my parents from a very young age. And I think that's one thing that has carried through me, because my first job and my second job didn't look like each other. Neither did my third job with the first two. Everything that I've done has been different. So if you look at my career, anyone who, if a recruiter looks at my resume, they think, wow, she's just been all over the place. But if you zoom out at a 50,000 level, it's a perfectly straight line that led me to entrepreneurship. All of these different experiences led me there. And I think the most important thing for me was not being afraid to fail and look bad. That ability, I think, will serve entrepreneurs really well.
Fantastic. You actually answered a set of questions I was going to ask later about entrepreneurship. We'll come back to the topic a bit later. But it is profound that you're comfortable to fail, but come back and understand it and then rise up again based on where you think your strengths are. Along the way, you have now started Vendia, which as an entrepreneur, as a co-founder. And I presume this is your first co-founding company, or did you co-found your previous startup?
This is my first co-founding company, it is.
Okay. So what gave you, so you obviously had a vision for Vendia when you co-founded it. So if you can share a bit about your vision for Vendia, what problem, what value it provides, and what are the key initiatives and strategies, that would be very useful for the audience.
Sounds great. When I ran the blockchain business for AWS, as I was talking about earlier, I met 1,092 unique customers. And all of these customers were saying this one big thing of why they were looking to use blockchains. They said, look, we have a lot of partners, any business does. We are making a lot of data because we've invested in these data making mechanisms, IoTs, mobiles, edge, digital transformation. We're making massive amounts of data, but all of this data is getting stuck in silos. Some of them are partner silos, some of them are cloud silos because we have teams over here that uses AWS, team over there uses Azure. Oh, by the way, we also have some on-prem and Teradata and Snowflake and Databricks. So data is getting stuck everywhere, and these companies didn't have access to data in real time to do something with it. And think about it, right? If you are a car manufacturer and you want to do just-in-time manufacturing, or if you are a food producer and you want to do autonomous replenishment, all of these cool next generation workloads that everybody talks about, what powers that? Real-time data. Right now, if you are really savvy technologically, you get batch data from last night. Most of the companies get a week-old data. All the data that they have access to in their Snowflake or their Redshift clusters are dead data. They're not live. They're not transactional data. They're analytics data. So you can do a lot of look backs, but you can't make any decisions in real time because you don't have access to anything in real time. So we took a step back. My co-founder and I kind of took a step back and thought, well, how can we help companies build these, the moniker now is the Web 3.0 applications, distributed across multiple parties and clouds, fully autonomous, that can handle real-time data. So how can we give them a low code, no code backend as a service to create distributed applications without having to, think about infrastructure. How can we do that? And that's why we built Vendia. So what Vendia does is backend as a service for distributed applications and data-driven applications, for real-time data applications. And that's what we've built. We have companies from auto manufacturers to food and ag, to air travel and hospitality, to nonprofits and small startups using us today in production with multiple partners, both internal and external. We're cross-cloud, so they can use all of their data irrespective of where they are without having to think about infrastructure. So that's what we built, and we're very excited for all the things that our customers are building.
Oh, that's fantastic. I would 100% agree with you in terms of the trends and what the problem sets that people are encountering and what you're solving is very, very important. And given the COVID situation, something that has already accelerated, which is enterprise adoption of the cloud. How do you see it playing out? Do you see public clouds completely taking over? And or do you see people having their own private clouds? I think the word hybrid may be passé these days, but we'd like to understand your perspective on the landscape of how people are viewing the cloud and how is it being addressed, perhaps both from a Vendia, Amazon, or even a personal perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is when I put on my, whether it's a Bank of America, Countrywide Merrill Lynch, or the AT&T hat on. When I was the buyer, I was not the infrastructure person selling it into enterprise, but I was the buyer. The most important thing for enterprises, mid-market companies doing business that are other than actually being just a tech company is, how do we sell more things fast at a lower cost? And the technology becomes an enabler decision. But what is also important to know is technology is still a means to an end to most of these companies. While some of us from the whether we are at a cloud service provider or from a startup perspective, start to look at our own solutions as this be all end all that a company needs to adopt. But from a company's perspective, it is still a supporting character. It's not the hero or the heroine of the stage here. So will all of the companies just give up on their hybrid clouds? I don't think so. There is a reason why companies have gotten this, whether it's a private cloud or an on-prem installation of their own or VMs for all of these years, because they have built applications which rip and replace is extremely painful. When you see a lot of these lift and shift to clouds, a lot of cloud providers talk about this, lift and shift is not always successful. Companies just want the outcomes and the benefits of using these public clouds without having to move all of their business up to a cloud, because that is undifferentiated work for them. So what companies are really looking for is, my data is where it is. I want to use the latest technology, the latest thing that the cloud has to offer, the most powerful thing in each of these clouds, instead of getting locked into one particular cloud, and without having to do undifferentiated work of Kubernetes or containers, least common denominator approach, installing it in each cloud. At the same time, take advantages of all the benefits. So all the enterprises are saying is, I want my data on-prem, but I want to use SageMaker because SageMaker is really good. And then I want to take that data and put it in Google BigQuery because that's really good. And I want to get all of my IoT from Azure because Azure is the best for IoT. And today you can't do that. You have to pick one cloud and stick with it through and through. And that's what's giving enterprises and mid-market a heartburn. They just want to pick and choose what they like, as opposed to being locked into one particular cloud. So I believe that all of the data repositories will still coexist because there is some value in each of them. We just have to figure out a better way to build plumbing between each other.
Got it. So you don't say hybrid cloud is dead. You're just
not
saying,
at all.
That's good.
There is a plumbing problem more than move everything from one place to another. problem.
Wonderful. And security plays into this whole thing. And security has been an inhibitor. So I know that it's slowly going away. Will that ever disappear in terms of the adoption of clouds, or what's your perspective on it?
You know, being from banking, highly regulated banking industry, it's a little bit of a learning curve to trust someone else rather apart from yourself, to get used to the notion that someone else is now responsible, even if it's a shared responsibility model, to trust. So that's more of a human condition than whether the technology is good enough or not. It's learned behaviors. So things like this is where things like blockchains or distributed ledgers, where you have this, again, I'm not talking about crypto, I'm not talking about Ethereum, I'm just talking about distributed ledgers where you have complete immutability and a history of everything that has happened to a transaction, full visibility to people who are supposed to have visibility to that data. That will help. So now, you know, when a bank says, hey, I want to use SageMaker on AWS, but I want my data in MySQL on-prem, and it goes to, you know, Teradata, then you see that your Teradata cluster on your on-prem and your cloud instance are virtually the same within milliseconds. Now that builds confidence. So there are some technical things that I think cloud service providers and startups as Vendia and others can do to build that, the notion of safety and security for highly regulated firms, because let's just face it, the cost of failure is extremely costly for these companies. So I think the modern technologies will definitely help alleviate that. But again, human condition, not a technical problem, so it'll take time.
Understood. So you mentioned blockchain, and you mentioned its role in some of the areas that you're talking about. Could you expand on that a little bit? How is the blockchain adoption within enterprises? Where do you see it playing a role? I'm not talking about just cryptocurrency or the finance space, but in a broad market, enterprise adoption of blockchain. Where do you see a role for blockchain?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very interesting paradigm that we're going through here. Now, I will generalize a little bit more from blockchain and talk about distributed ledgers as a whole, not just the implementation of blockchain, because that evokes a certain, you know, as you said, crypto or public blockchain, so to speak. Like if you really think of what blockchains are, right? It's just a 3-layer implementation, 3-tier architecture. You have a distributed ledger. Everyone sees the same version of the truth. That's the bottom part. Then you have a consensus layer. Did they all agree on this transaction? Was it supposed to happen the way it did happen? And the third one is what they call in the blockchain community, smart contracts, or, you know, the rest of us normal people call it data triggers. If this happens, then that happens. Those are the 3 things, you know. Airline Reporting Corporation is this company that settles airline tickets for all of North American airlines. You think of that complexity, right? You fly from San Francisco to New York on the way of, let's say, Denver. You have, let's say, there are 2 airlines in the mix. There's a code share. There are 3 airports, many municipalities. Airline Reporting Corporation has to take that money from whether Kayak or Expedia or whoever you pay to and settle it, ping each of them point to point, and then settle that transaction across multiple pieces. You're talking hundreds of partners for a cross-country flight. Now, if all of these partners are not on the same page, if they don't see the same data in real time, then what happens is your settlement process gets later and later and later till it becomes weeks. And if you're settling, you know, 100, 200 million tickets a month, then you're consistently late for 100, 200 million tickets a month. It's a lot of back and forth with, you know, general APIs. And that's where all parties who are privy to a particular transaction sees the same version of the truth in real time. That's when it becomes very important that's where blockchains or distributed ledgers becomes very important for enterprises. And that's the use case that we see. We see this again and again in auto companies. We see during their supply chain. We see this in a nonprofit called Best Friends Animal Society. They have 13,000 partners across the US, and most of these are small shelters, which they don't have very high IT capability. But with this type of a backend, they all see the same version of the truth in real time regarding, animal health. You see this in energy. So this is where we see the implementation going. It's not really for a crypto use case, or someone has to prove that, Rajan has to prove that he is who he says he is, but it's more of, are my partners who's supposed to see this seeing the same version of data as I am or not?
So would it be safe to assume then this kind of distributed ledger underlies also something that Vendia does?
Yeah, we use all cloud native implementation of distributed ledgers. So in our case, think of, let's say, a company that is on AWS and another company on Azure. Both of them are partners, and they need to talk to each other. Today, you would use an API to go back and forth between each other. What we do is we build the whole stack, the compute, networking, storage, databases for both the parties in two clouds, and completely do all of the orchestration between them. So all they have to do is build an application and business logic layer over it. And all they need to bring to us is their schema or their data model. And in minutes, you get this backend infrastructure that's completely ACID, multi-primary, highly scalable, all based on serverless. So the example that I just gave you that works on Azure is the thing that we just launched pretty recently. We have full Azure support now out. And in addition to that, we're making it very easy for everyday developers to build this very powerful cross-party, cross-cloud, real-time application without having to worry about infrastructure. So in addition to Azure support, what we've also launched is support for smart contracts. Smart contracts on Vendia enables developers to build this fully managed workloads that can be triggered when data changes in one partner and then something else needs to happen in another partner. I mean, think about this, right? If you are booking an airline ticket on Kayak and you are an employee of a particular company that has some kind of an agreement with a particular airline, let's say Delta, and Delta gives employees of your company, let's say 10% discount, then your action, you as an employee's action on kayak.com will trigger something in Delta almost immediately without either Delta or Kayak having the setup infrastructure layer. So that's super powerful for multi-party, multi-cloud businesses. That's how smart contract enables them. And you can write this in any language. In addition to that, what we've also done is made it easy for everyday developers to start building applications. So you don't have to go through a command line. It's a very easy entity explorer. So think of this as a no code, low code type, drag and drop type of an interface. This enables non-developers to create and manage decentralized application. If you've ever tried to build blockchain app, whether it's on Ethereum or on something else, it is so complicated. You need to learn Solidity, and now you don't. It's everything can be done with a no code UI there. Now, to make it very easy and affordable for everyday developers to build this, we've also launched an individual plan. For less than it costs for you to get coffee at your favorite coffee shop every day, you can build a decentralized application from ground up that will scale with you. Whether you want to do it for an experimentation or build your own startup, you don't have to do it the hard way anymore. You use Vendia to create real-time applications that span multiple partners and multiple clouds. So that's exactly what we do at Vendia as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Shruthi, it has been a very informative talk so far. Before we part, what is your advice for entrepreneurs and how they would interact with large companies What's how about the funding environment? Anything failings that you have personally come across? Any advice that you can share with entrepreneurs would be very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for entrepreneurs who are trying to do new things, new categories, something that's not already in a market, unless you're building a slightly better, faster, cheaper, better looking mousetrap, this is really for you. Category construction is really hard, but what is very helpful is to have about 3x more or maybe 5x more design partners than you think you need. And asking them, asking your customers how you would describe you. We always go back to our customers and say, how do you describe us? What words do you use? How do you talk to your colleagues about us? That is very helpful. And starting there, rather than starting with funding, starting with going to the investors is also helpful because it's very educational to themselves. This goes back to my thesis on failure and being comfortable with failure. Is talking to customers and talking about new things that don't exist in the market is scary. They could judge you. They probably will judge you, but it's also very informational and very satisfying to hear how they perceive you and how you have transformed in your own customers' eyes. So I say to the entrepreneurs, throw all the shame and judgment out of the window and go be vulnerable and ask for help from your customers, from potential investors, from your colleagues, everyone, and be okay with being judged and be okay with not having that safety net, that cushion or that drug that comes with, staying in a big company. That's my recommendation.
Shruthi, that was wonderful advice and a very original advice. So it was a great talk. I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you. And thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back with another episode of The Spotlight soon. Thank you.